My daughter and her husband have been discussing getting rid of me over morning coffee like ordering takeout. My name is Thomas Cooper, and I'm that father. After my wife died, I thought Jenny and her husband Kyle were being protective, helping with finances, suggesting I simplify my life, talking about my future. I was grateful for family who cared, until I overheard them discussing the exact dollar amount of my life insurance and how to make my death look accidental. They forgot something important about me. Before I became a grieving widower, I was a Marine intelligence officer for 28 years. We're trained to recognize threats and neutralize them. What happened next will probably shock you as much as it shocked them. And if you're someone who values justice, family loyalty, and watching people get exactly what they deserve, you're going to want to see how this plays out. Please subscribe and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Here's the story of how I disappeared before morning, and how 2 people learned you should never underestimate a Marine. Martha died on March 15, 2024. 69 years old. Pancreatic cancer took her in 8 weeks. I was lost. Completely lost. For 43 years, she handled everything. Bills, social events, family calls. I cooked. She managed. That was our system. Jenny showed up 3 days after the funeral with a folder full of papers. "Dad, you can't handle all this alone," she said, spreading documents across my kitchen table. "Let me help with Mom's accounts." I handed over the checkbook. What did I know about joint accounts and beneficiary forms? 2 weeks later, Kyle appeared with a legal pad full of suggestions. "Tom, you're sitting on too much cash," he said, using his financial advisor voice. "We need to consolidate, simplify your portfolio." My wife left me $340,000 in savings. Kyle wanted to move it into better investments. Investments he managed, naturally. The first sign something was wrong came in May. Jenny mentioned assisted living. "Dad, this house is too big. You're isolated out here. Golden Years Manor has activities, medical staff on site." I'd driven past Golden Years Manor. It looked like a hospital with better landscaping. "I'm fine here," I told her. "Fine?" Kyle laughed. "Tom, you eat frozen dinners every night. You haven't mowed the lawn in 6 weeks. "True, but I was grieving, not incompetent." The second sign was harder to ignore. Kyle started asking about my VA benefits. "How much disability do you get monthly?" he asked during one of their check-ins. $6,200, I said. "And life insurance?" $450,000 through VA, $500,000 private policy with MetLife. Kyle wrote everything down. At the time, I thought he was being thorough. By August, their visits had a different tone. Less concerned, more evaluative. "Dad's really struggling," Jenny told Kyle one evening as if I wasn't sitting right there. "Look at him. He barely speaks anymore." I was quiet because I was sad. My wife of 4 decades was gone. Silence felt appropriate. "Maybe we should talk to Dr. Peterson about depression medication," Kyle suggested. I wasn't depressed. I was grieving. There's a difference. But they'd already decided what was wrong with me, and more importantly, they'd decided what to do about it. The conversations became more pointed. Jenny would arrive with brochures for senior communities. Kyle brought articles about cognitive decline and safety concerns for elderly living alone. "Tom, you left the stove on last Tuesday," Kyle said. I had reheated soup. The burner was on for 12 minutes. "And Mrs. Henderson said you seemed confused when she saw you at the grocery store." Mrs. Henderson was 87 and half deaf. Our entire conversation consisted of her asking if I was buying cat food and me explaining I don't own a cat. But Kyle documented everything. Jenny nodded sympathetically while taking notes. They were building a case. I just didn't know for what yet. The breaking point came when Jenny suggested I sign power of attorney papers just in case something happens. "It's precautionary, Dad. If you get sick, if you have an accident, we need to be able to help." The papers were already prepared. Kyle had contacts at a law firm that specialized in elder care. "Just sign here," Jenny said, pointing to highlighted lines. "We'll keep them safe." I stalled, said I needed to read everything first. Jenny exchanged a look with Kyle. "Dad, this is basic planning. Mom would want you protected." Using Martha's memory to pressure me crossed a line I didn't even know existed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about their urgency bothered me. Why now? Why the sudden push for legal control? I'd spent 28 years in Marine intelligence. My job was reading people, detecting threats, gathering information. So I started paying attention, really paying attention. And that's when I bought the Nanny Cam. The Wisecam V3 cost $84.99 on Amazon Prime, delivered in 2 days. I positioned it above the refrigerator, angled toward the kitchen table where Jenny and Kyle always sat during their visits. The camera was small enough to blend in with my coffee maker and toaster. For 3 days, nothing happened. They came by twice, but the conversations were normal, checking if I needed groceries, asking about doctor appointments. Then came Thursday morning, August 15th. Jenny arrived at 7:15 a.m. with coffee and Kyle's favorite blueberry muffins from Dunkin'. Kyle showed up 10 minutes later. I was in my bedroom, supposedly still sleeping. They thought I couldn't hear them from the kitchen. They were wrong. "The insurance payout is $950,000 total," Kyle said, his voice clear on the recording. "$450 from VA, $500 from MetLife." "How long after we file?" Jenny asked. "Standard policy pays within 30 days, but there's a clause in the MetLife policy, double indemnity." "What's double indemnity?" "If it's accidental death, the private policy pays $1 million instead of $500,000. Total payout becomes $1.4 million. My blood went cold. "And the VA policy?" "That one's trickier. But if he's declared incompetent first and we have conservatorship, we become the beneficiaries automatically." Jenny was quiet for a moment. Then, "How do we make it look accidental?" Kyle's answer came fast, like he'd already thought this through. "Nursing home first. Get him placed at Golden Years Manor. Once he's there, we file for conservatorship based on his depression and cognitive decline. Dr. Peterson's already noted his grief symptoms. We can build on that." "What about the depression angle?" "Perfect setup. Elderly widower, isolated, refusing medication. Classic suicide risk profile. Once he's declared incompetent, we control all medical decisions." "But if it's suicide, we don't get the accidental death benefit." Kyle laughed. Actually laughed. "Jenny, nursing homes have accidents all the time. Falls in the bathroom, medication mix-ups, choking incidents. With his heart condition and age, any of those could be fatal." Heart condition. I'd mentioned chest pains to Dr. Peterson after Martha died. Stress-related, he said. Normal grief response. Kyle had turned my broken heart into a murder weapon. "Timeline?" Jenny asked. "I need the conservatorship papers filed by September 1st. Judge Martinez approves 90% of elder care petitions. Once we have legal control, we move him to Golden Years. Give it 6 weeks to establish the depression narrative. Then Thomas Cooper has an unfortunate accident, and we pay off my debts with his insurance money." Debts. Kyle was in debt. The conversation continued for 18 more minutes. They discussed which creditors were pressuring Kyle hardest. Something about casino markers and loan sharks. Numbers that made my military pension look like pocket change. $520,000. That's what Kyle owed. My life insurance would cover his gambling debts with $800,000 left over. They finished their coffee, cleaned up the evidence, and left. Jenny kissed my forehead goodbye, the same way she had when she was 7 years old. 22 minutes of recorded conversation. Every word time-stamped, every detail documented. But hearing the plan wasn't enough. I needed to understand how they'd gotten this far. That afternoon, I called Marine Federal Credit Union, where I had my shared family credit monitoring service, for $12.99 a month. I could see credit reports for all family members I'd co-signed for over the years. Kyle's report was a disaster. $47,000 in credit card debt. Multiple cash advances from Atlantic City casinos. Payment history showed late fees dating back 8 months. But that wasn't the worst part. Kyle had already researched conservatorship laws. His browser history, which I accessed through our shared family computer plan, showed dozens of searches for elder incompetence proceedings, Virginia conservatorship requirements, and life insurance beneficiary changes. He downloaded forms from the Virginia Beach Circuit Court website. Draft petitions claiming I was unable to manage financial affairs due to grief-related cognitive impairment. The petition was already written, 80% complete. They weren't planning this as they went. This was a months-long operation, and I was the target. But Kyle made one critical error. He forgot that before I was a vulnerable widower, I was a Marine intelligence officer. And Marines don't just gather intelligence. We act on it. The war for my life was about to begin, and I had every intention of winning. But first, I needed allies, and evidence, and a battle plan that would destroy them before they could destroy me. That's when I remembered something my commanding officer told me in Beirut, 1985. "Cooper, The best defense is making sure your enemy never gets to attack. Time to go on the offense. I spent Friday night reviewing everything Kyle had said about conservatorship procedures. 28 years of intelligence work taught me to verify every detail before taking action. Kyle was right about Judge Martinez. Virginia Beach Circuit Court records showed she approved elder care petitions at a 93% rate. Her philosophy was, family knows best. Saturday morning, Jenny called to check on me. "Dad, how are you feeling? You seemed tired yesterday." The voice was caring. The timing was tactical. "I'm fine, sweetheart." "Kyle mentioned you've been having chest pains again. Have you called Dr. Peterson?" "First probe. They were building their medical case." "Just stress," I said. "Nothing serious." "Dad, at your age, chest pains are always serious. Promise me you'll make an appointment." "I will." But I wouldn't. Not yet. Every medical visit they could twist into evidence of decline. Sunday brought the first direct test. Kyle arrived alone at 3 p.m. with a folder marked Financial Planning. "Tom, we need to talk about your cash situation." He sat at the kitchen table, same spot where he'd planned my murder 3 days earlier. "What cash situation?" "You're holding too much in checking. $340,000 just sitting there earning nothing. In this market, you're losing money daily." Kyle spread out investment prospectuses, all managed by his firm. These growth funds averaged 8% returns last year. I picked up one of the brochures. "What are the management fees?" "Standard rate, 2.5% annually." "So you make $25,000 a year managing my money." Kyle's smile faltered. "Tom, this isn't about fees. This is about maximizing your assets." "For who?" The question hung in the air. Kyle's financial advisor mask slipped for just a moment. "For you, obviously, and for Jenny's inheritance down the road." There it was, the inheritance angle. "Kyle, I'm 71, not 91. I plan to spend most of this money myself." His face hardened. "On what? Tom, you eat frozen dinners and watch TV. You're not exactly living large." First attack, diminishing my lifestyle to justify taking control. "Maybe I want to travel. Maybe I want to buy a boat." "A boat?" Kyle laughed. "Tom, you haven't driven further than the grocery store in months." Grief isn't permanent incapacity. No, but depression is a serious medical condition, and you're showing classic symptoms. Second attack, medical diagnosis without medical training. "I'm not depressed, Kyle. I'm sad. My wife died." "Tom, sadness doesn't last 6 months. That's clinical depression. Jenny and I are worried about your judgment." Third attack, questioning my mental competence. Time to push back. "Kyle, how much do you owe in gambling debts?" The color drained from his face. "What?" "Atlantic City. Borgata Casino. 47,000 in markers plus interest." Kyle stood up slowly. "How do you know that?" "Credit monitoring service. Family plan. You're on it." The financial advisor facade crumbled completely. "Tom, that's temporary. I have a payment plan." "Payment plan for 520,000 total debt?" Kyle's eyes went wide. He hadn't expected me to know the full amount. "That's not your business." "It becomes my business when you're planning to pay it with my life insurance." Dead silence. Kyle stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "I don't know what you're talking about." August 15th, 7:23 a.m., 22 minutes of conversation about conservatorship, nursing homes, and accidental death benefits. Kyle's legs gave out. He sat down hard. "You were recording us?" "Marine intelligence, Kyle. We're trained to gather information before enemy operations begin." "Enemy? Tom, we're family. Family doesn't plan murder over coffee." Kyle tried to recover. "Tom, you're confused. We never said anything about what you're suggesting is insane. Double indemnity clause. MetLife policy pays $1 million for accidental death. Quote, once he's declared incompetent, we control all medical decisions. End quote. Kyle's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You're having a breakdown, Tom. This is exactly what Jenny and I were worried about." Classic deflection. Turn the accuser into the accused. "Am I? Or are you panicking because your plan just fell apart?" Kyle stood up, trying to regain control. "Tom, I think you need help. Professional help." "I think you need a lawyer." "For what?" "Elder financial abuse is a federal crime, Kyle. Insurance fraud is a federal crime. Conspiracy to commit murder is definitely a federal crime." Kyle's face went pale. "You can't prove anything." 22 minutes of recorded conversation, time-stamped, high-definition audio. Kyle headed for the door. Tom, you're sick. This conversation proves it. Kyle, he turned around. Tell Jenny we need to have a family meeting, all three of us, Thursday night. Why? Because Thursday is when you plan to file the conservatorship petition. I'd like to discuss that. Kyle's hand shook as he reached for the door handle. You're making a mistake, Tom. The only mistake I made was trusting you. Kyle left without another word. I watched through the window as he sat in his car for 10 minutes, probably calling Jenny, probably trying to figure out how much I really knew. The answer was everything. But they didn't know I'd already taken the next step. While Kyle was threatening me with professional help, I'd already contacted professionals of my own. Real professionals. With badges. The counteroffensive was about to begin, and Kyle's gambling debts were about to become the least of his problems. But first, I needed to let them make one more mistake. One big public mistake that would give me everything I needed to destroy them completely. Kyle must have called Jenny immediately. She showed up at my house 30 minutes after he left, her pharmaceutical sales rep smile replaced by something harder. Dad? Kyle said you accused him of some terrible things. I was reading the Sunday paper at the kitchen table. Same spot where they'd planned my death. I accused him of being in debt, which he is. His finances aren't your concern. They are when he's planning to solve them with my murder. Jenny sat down across from me. For the first time in months, she looked at me like I was dangerous instead of pathetic. Dad, you're scaring me. This paranoid thinking, these wild accusations. Mom's death affected you more than we realized. Your mother's death broke my heart, not my brain. But you're talking about recordings, about conspiracy theories. Dad, that's not normal grief. I folded the newspaper carefully. You want to know what's not normal grief? Planning your father's funeral before he's sick. Jenny's mask slipped for a second. Fear flickered across her face. No one's planning anything except getting you help. Help from who? Dr. Peterson thinks you might benefit from a psychiatric evaluation, just to rule out depression-related cognitive issues. There it was, the medical angle Kyle had mentioned. And if Dr. Peterson finds cognitive issues? Then we explore options, assisted living, maybe medication, possibly. Conservatorship? Jenny's pause lasted 1 second too long. If necessary. Filed by who? Dad, you're asking questions that don't matter yet. They matter to me. Jenny stood up, switching tactics. Dad, I'm worried about you living alone. This house is too isolated. If something happened, if you fell, if you had a medical emergency... I have a medical alert system, which you don't wear. True. The button sat in my bedroom drawer. And Mrs. Henderson said you seemed confused at the grocery store last week. Mrs. Henderson again, their star witness. What exactly did Mrs. Henderson say? That you couldn't remember what you went there to buy, that you seemed lost. I had been looking for Martha's favorite tea, Earl Grey with bergamot. I'd stood in the tea aisle for 10 minutes before remembering she was gone. Grief, not confusion, but they were rewriting my story. Dad, Kyle and I think a change of environment might help, somewhere with activities, medical supervision. Golden Years Manor. It's a beautiful facility. We could tour it this week. And if I refuse? Jenny's sales training kicked in. Why would you refuse? Dad, you're isolating yourself. You barely eat, you don't socialize, you're having paranoid thoughts about people trying to hurt you. She was good, turning every legitimate concern into a symptom. Maybe I should call Captain Brooks. Jenny frowned. Who's Captain Brooks? VA counselor, Marine Corps veteran. He helps with grief counseling. The name meant nothing to Jenny. She had no idea I'd been building my own support network. Dad, civilian counselors might be better. Someone who specializes in elder care. Or someone who specializes in conservatorship evaluations? Jenny's face hardened. Dad, your suspicious thinking is exactly what concerns us. Suspicious thinking kept me alive for 28 years. You're not in the military anymore. Once a Marine, always a Marine. Jenny gathered her purse. Dad, we're scheduling that tour at Golden Years Manor, Thursday afternoon. I'll be busy Thursday. Busy with what? Appointments. What kind of appointments? The kind that veterans make when someone threatens their security. Jenny paused at the door. Dad, if you fight us on this, it just proves you need help. And if you push this, it proves Kyle was right about the timeline. Jenny's face went white. Timeline for what? Ask Kyle, he knows. After she left, I made 3 phone calls. First call, Captain Raymond Brooks, Virginia Medical Center, veteran to veteran. He understood immediately. Second call, Margaret Davis, elder law attorney, Marine wife for 30 years. She understood everything. Third call, FBI Field Office, Norfolk, Financial Crimes Division. Agent Sarah Chen specialized in elder financial abuse cases. All 3 appointments were scheduled for Thursday. The same day Kyle planned to file conservatorship papers. The same day Jenny wanted to tour nursing homes. The same day their plan would meet Marine Corps intelligence tactics. Kyle thought he was fighting a confused old man. Jenny thought she was managing a grief-stricken father. They were both wrong. They were fighting a Marine, and Marines never retreat. Tuesday night, Jenny called with an invitation. Dad, the Hendersons are having a cookout Thursday evening. They specifically asked if you'd join them. Perfect timing. Thursday was conservatorship filing day, nursing home tour day, and now social proof day. I'll think about it. Dad, you need to get out more. Mrs. Henderson is worried about you. Mrs. Henderson, their star witness, the woman who thought I was confused at the grocery store. What time? 6 o'clock, just neighbors, very casual. Thursday evening arrived with unseasonably warm weather for September. The Hendersons' backyard was full of familiar faces, 20 years of living on Maple Street, and I knew everyone. Jenny and Kyle arrived 5 minutes after me, carrying a fruit salad and concerned expressions. Tom? Bob Henderson waved me over to the grill. Haven't seen you much since Martha passed. How are you holding up? Taking it day by day, Bob. That's all any of us can do. Bob flipped burgers with practiced ease. Martha was a special lady. Yes, she was. Kyle appeared beside us with 2 beers. Tom, you should probably stick to water, with your blood pressure medication. I don't take blood pressure medication. My last reading was 120/80. I'm fine with beer, Kyle. Dad, you told Dr. Peterson you've been having chest pains. Alcohol can interfere with cardiac symptoms. Bob frowned. Chest pains. Tom, you should get that checked. They're stress-related, I said. Kyle jumped in. That's what he says, but at his age, you can't be too careful. First attack, public health concerns. Dinner was served buffet style. I loaded my plate normally. Burger, coleslaw, potato salad. Jenny intercepted me near the potato salad. Dad, you should probably avoid mayonnaise-based sides. Your stomach's been sensitive lately. Mrs. Henderson overheard. Sensitive stomach? That's common at your age, Tom. I don't have a sensitive stomach. Jenny lowered her voice, but not enough. Dad, you mentioned digestive issues last week. I had mentioned that frozen dinners sometimes upset my stomach. But Jenny was turning normal conversation into medical symptoms. Second attack. Dietary restrictions suggesting declining health. After dinner, Kyle orchestrated the main event. Tom, I brought those financial planning documents we discussed. Maybe Bob could take a look, get a second opinion. Bob Henderson was a retired accountant, respected in the neighborhood. Kyle spread papers across the picnic table. Tom's sitting on too much cash. I'm trying to help him diversify his portfolio. Bob examined the investment prospectuses. These look solid, Tom. Good returns. The management fees are high, I said. Kyle laughed. Dad, you can't manage money like it's 1985. The market's changed. Bob nodded. Kyle's right. Professional management is worth the fees. Maybe, but I'd like to review everything with my own financial advisor. Kyle's smile tightened. Tom, you don't have a financial advisor. I do now. Who? Margaret Davis, elder law specialist. The conversation stopped. Kyle's face went pale. Jenny jumped in. Dad, elder law is for people with cognitive issues. You don't need that kind of specialist. Mrs. Henderson leaned forward. Cognitive issues? Tom, are you having memory problems? Third attack. Public discussion of mental competency. No memory problems, I said. Kyle disagreed. Tom, you forgot our lunch appointment last Tuesday. We never had a lunch appointment. But now 12 neighbors thought I was forgetting plans. And you left your stove on when I visited last week, Jenny added. I had reheated soup. The burner was on for 12 minutes while I ate. Plus the grocery store incident, Kyle continued. Mrs. Henderson said you seemed confused. Mrs. Henderson nodded sadly. Poor Tom couldn't remember what he went there to buy, just wandered the aisles looking lost. I was looking for Martha's tea, but now it sounded like dementia. Fourth attack. Character witnesses confirming cognitive decline. Bob Henderson put down his beer. Tom, maybe you should consider some help. In-home care or assisted living? Golden years. Manor is excellent, Jenny said quickly. We're touring it tomorrow. Tomorrow? I asked. I told you about the tour, Dad. We discussed it Sunday. We hadn't discussed anything. She'd announced it. Kyle nodded sympathetically. Tom's been resistant to help. Pride, you know. Pride? I asked. Dad, you won't admit you're struggling. Living alone, eating frozen dinners, avoiding social activities. I'm at a social activity right now. Because we brought you, Jenny said. You wouldn't have come otherwise. True, but not for the reasons she was implying. Fifth attack. Social isolation suggesting depression. The coup de grace came during dessert. Kyle stood up, addressing the entire group. Everyone, I need to share something. Tom's been having some concerning episodes lately. 20 neighbors turned to stare at me. Episodes? Bob asked. Paranoid thinking, accusations. Yesterday he claimed Jenny and I were plotting against him. Murmurs around the group. Sympathetic looks directed at Jenny. Kyle continued. He bought a hidden camera to spy on us. Says he has recordings of imaginary conversations. Mrs. Henderson gasped. Hidden cameras? Oh my. The camera's real, I said. So are the recordings? Kyle shook his head sadly. Tom, this is exactly what we're worried about. These paranoid delusions, these conspiracy theories. Play the recording, I said. Dad, there is no recording of what you think you heard. August 15th, 7:23 a.m., 22 minutes. Jenny placed her hand on my arm. Dad, you're embarrassing yourself. The entire party was watching now. 20 neighbors who'd known me for decades, seeing me accused of paranoid delusions by my own family. Kyle delivered the final blow. Tom, Jenny and I love you. We want to help, but you have to admit you need help. What kind of help? Professional evaluation? Medical supervision? A safe environment where people can monitor your symptoms. The word symptoms hung in the air like a death sentence. Bob Henderson spoke for the group. Tom, if your family's concerned, maybe you should listen. Heads nodded around the circle. 12 neighbors agreeing that I needed professional help. Kyle had orchestrated it perfectly. Public consensus that Tom Cooper was losing his mind. But Kyle made one critical error. He forgot that Marines don't surrender. We regroup. I stood up slowly, looking around the circle of concerned faces. You're right, I said. I do need professional help. Kyle's face lit up with victory. But not the kind you're thinking. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed a number I'd memorized that afternoon. Agent Chen? This is Thomas Cooper. I'm ready to make that formal statement about the elder financial abuse case. The backyard went silent. Kyle's victory smile disappeared. Jenny's face went white. And 20 neighbors just became witnesses to something entirely different than what they'd expected. The real show was about to begin. Agent Sarah Chen arrived at 7:30 p.m. in an unmarked sedan. FBI credentials and 15 years of financial crimes experience. The Hendersons' backyard cookout had transformed into something none of the neighbors expected. 20 witnesses to what was about to become a federal investigation. Mr. Cooper. Agent Chen shook my hand. Thank you for calling. I understand you have evidence of financial fraud and elder abuse. Kyle tried to intervene. Agent, this is a misunderstanding. My father-in-law is having some cognitive issues. He's been making false accusations. Agent Chen looked at Kyle with the expression law enforcement reserves for people who think they're cleverer than they are. Mr. Sullivan, I presume? Kyle Sullivan, certified financial advisor, Virginia Beach? Yes, but Mr. Sullivan, elder financial abuse is a federal crime. When Mr. Cooper contacted us Tuesday afternoon, we ran preliminary background checks. Kyle's face went pale. Background checks? Standard procedure. Your gambling debts, your casino markers, your recent internet searches for conservatorship proceedings. Dead silence in the backyard. 20 neighbors hanging on every word. Jenny stepped forward. Agent, my father has been acting paranoid lately. He thinks Kyle and I are trying to hurt him. Miss Cooper Sullivan, pharmaceutical sales representative for Bristol Myers? Agent Chen consulted her notes. Your father contacted us because he has recordings. 22 minutes of conversation between you and your husband discussing his life insurance policy. Recordings? Mrs. Henderson whispered. I pulled out my phone. August 15th, 7:23 a.m. Would you like to hear it? Kyle lunged forward. Tom, don't! Agent Chen raised her hand. Mr. Sullivan, please step back. The first 30 seconds of the recording played through my phone speaker. Kyle's voice, clear as day. The insurance payout is $950,000 total. $450 from VA, $500 from MetLife. Jenny's response. How long after we file? The Hendersons' backyard was dead silent except for the recording. Kyle. Standard policy pays within 30 days, but there's a clause in the MetLife policy. Double indemnity. Jenny. What's double indemnity? Kyle. If it's accidental death, the private policy pays $1 million instead of $500,000. Mrs. Henderson gasped audibly. I stopped the recording. Should I continue? Kyle was shaking. Tom, you're taking that out of context. Context? Agent Chen asked. Mr. Sullivan, what context makes discussing accidental death benefits appropriate? Kyle couldn't answer. Bob Henderson found his voice. Jesus Christ, Kyle, you were planning to kill Tom? No, Jenny protested. We were discussing hypotheticals. Agent Chen wasn't buying it. Hypotheticals about nursing home placement and conservatorship proceedings? I played the next section. Kyle's voice. Nursing home first. Get him placed at Golden Years Manor. Once he's there, we file for conservatorship based on his depression and cognitive decline. The crowd was staring at Kyle like he'd grown horns. Kyle tried damage control. Tom's been depressed since Martha died. We were genuinely concerned. Concerned enough to research life insurance fraud? Agent Chen asked. She produced a folder thick with papers. Mr. Sullivan, our cybercrime unit examined your internet history. Searches for elder incompetence proceedings, Virginia conservatorship requirements, and life insurance beneficiary changes. Kyle's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Agent Chen continued. You also downloaded forms from Virginia Beach Circuit Court. Draft petitions claiming Mr. Cooper was unable to manage financial affairs due to grief-related cognitive impairment. Where did you get that? Kyle whispered. Federal warrant, issued Tuesday afternoon after Mr. Cooper's initial contact. The neighbors were staring at Kyle and Jenny like they were strangers. 20 years of community relationships destroyed in 20 minutes. There's more, Agent Chen said. Mr. Sullivan, your gambling debts total $520,000. Atlantic City casinos, online poker sites, sports betting applications. Kyle sat down heavily on the picnic table bench. Your creditors have been pressuring you for payment. Some of them aren't traditional lenders. Jenny spoke for the first time in 5 minutes. Kyle, what creditors? Agent Chen consulted her notes. 3 casino marker accounts, 2 online lending services, and 1 private lending company that specializes in gambling debt collection. Translation: loan sharks. Kyle's pharmaceutical sales rep wife just learned her husband owed money to dangerous people. The timeline is particularly interesting, Agent Chen continued. Mr. Sullivan, your research into conservatorship proceedings began 6 weeks after Mrs. Cooper's death, the same week your largest creditor demanded payment. The motive was crystal clear. Kyle needed money fast, and Tom's life insurance was the solution. Bob Henderson spoke for everyone. Kyle, how could you even think about this? Kyle finally found his voice. We weren't actually going to. Tom, you have to believe me. Believe you? I asked. Kyle, you laughed when you described nursing home accidents. Quote, falls in the bathroom, medication mix-ups, choking incidents. Mrs. Henderson looked physically ill. Agent Chen took control. Mr. Cooper, we'll need the complete recording as evidence. Mr. Sullivan? Miss Cooper Sullivan, you're both under federal investigation for conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse and insurance fraud. Kyle stood up shakily. We need lawyers. Yes, you do, Agent Chen agreed. Federal crimes carry mandatory minimum sentences. Elder abuse, insurance fraud, conspiracy charges. Jenny grabbed Kyle's arm. Kyle, what have you done? What he'd done was underestimate a Marine. Agent Chen, I said, there's additional evidence. I handed her a manila envelope. Kyle's complete financial records, credit card statements showing casino charges, loan documents, and text messages between him and Jenny discussing the plan. Kyle stared at the envelope. How did you get my text messages? Family phone plan, I said. You're on my account. Has been for 3 years. Jenny's pharmaceutical sales training never covered this scenario. Agent Chen flipped through the text messages. Miss Cooper Sullivan, these messages show you and your husband discussing your father's unfortunate accident and how to speed up the timeline. 20 neighbors watched Jenny's world collapse in real time. Kyle made one last desperate attempt. Tom, you're my family. We would never actually hurt you. Kyle, you scheduled my nursing home tour for tomorrow. You filed conservatorship papers this morning. Agent Chen looked up sharply. You filed conservatorship papers? Kyle realized he'd just confessed to another federal crime. I was trying to protect him. Protect him by taking control of his finances 3 days before his accident? The Hendersons' backyard had become a crime scene. 20 witnesses to Kyle's complete confession. Agent Chen closed her folder. Mr. Sullivan, Miss Cooper Sullivan, you're both subjects of a federal investigation. I strongly advise you to contact attorneys immediately. Kyle and Jenny headed for the exit, followed by the stares of neighbors who'd known them for years. Mrs. Henderson approached me as they left. Tom, I'm so sorry. If I'd known. You couldn't have known. They're very good at deception. Bob Henderson shook his head. 20 years. And I never suspected Kyle was capable of this. Agent Chen handed me her card. Mr. Cooper, we'll need formal statements tomorrow. Your military background helped you recognize and document this threat. Most victims aren't so prepared. Most victims aren't Marines. No, sir, they aren't. The cookout was over, but the legal battle was just beginning. Kyle thought he was fighting a confused old man. Instead, he'd picked a fight with the FBI. And Marines never lose fights. We just choose our battlefield. Kyle chose financial fraud. I chose federal court. Game over. Friday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. Margaret Davis's law office, Norfolk Federal Building, 23rd floor. Agent Chen arrived with 2 colleagues from the Financial Crimes Unit. I brought 22 minutes of recorded evidence and 28 years of military discipline. Kyle and Jenny arrived with expensive lawyers. Mr. Cooper, Margaret Davis opened the meeting. Thank you for contacting our firm. Elder financial abuse cases are our specialty. Kyle's attorney, Richard Webb from Morrison & Associates, attempted damage control immediately. Ms. Davis, my clients were acting in good faith. Mr. Cooper's family was genuinely concerned about his well-being after his wife's death. Agent Chen responded. Mr. Webb, genuine concern doesn't involve researching double indemnity clauses. She placed the complete evidence file on the conference table. 22 minutes of recorded conversation discussing conservatorship fraud and insurance murder. Webb's confidence evaporated. Murder is a strong word. What word would you use for discussing nursing home accidents to trigger life insurance payouts? Jenny's attorney, Linda Walsh, tried a different approach. Agent Chen, my client is a pharmaceutical sales representative with no criminal history. She was manipulated by her husband's financial desperation. Miss Walsh, your client actively participated in planning the fraud. Text message evidence shows she suggested speeding up the timeline. I played the recording's most damaging section. Jenny's voice asking, "How do we make it look accidental?" Webb winced. That statement was taken out of context. What context makes planning accidental death appropriate? Margaret Davis asked. No answer. Agent Chen opened her federal case file. Mr. Sullivan, your gambling debts total $520,000. Your creditors include Atlantic City casinos and private lending companies. Kyle spoke for the first time. My debts don't prove anything. Combined with recorded conversations about life insurance fraud, they prove motive. Agent Chen continued. Your internet search history shows conservatorship research beginning March 30th, 6 weeks after Mrs. Cooper's death. Research isn't a crime. Research combined with action is conspiracy. You filed conservatorship papers Thursday morning. Kyle's face went white. His attorney didn't know about the filing. Webb leaned over. Kyle, you filed papers without consulting us? I was trying to protect Tom. By taking control of his finances? I asked. Agent Chen produced the filed documents. Mr. Sullivan, these papers claim Mr. Cooper is unable to manage financial affairs due to grief-related cognitive impairment. Based on what medical evidence? Margaret Davis asked. Kyle couldn't answer. There is no medical evidence, I said. Dr. Peterson's records show normal grief counseling. No cognitive impairment, no depression diagnosis. Webb tried to recover. Grief can affect judgment. Not according to the VA psychiatric evaluation, Margaret Davis said, producing another document. Mr. Cooper underwent comprehensive testing Wednesday. Perfect cognitive function, no depression, no impairment. Kyle's case was falling apart in real time. Agent Chen delivered the knockout blow. Mr. Sullivan, your creditors contacted you Tuesday night. They know about the federal investigation. Kyle's face went pale. What did you tell them? We didn't tell them anything, but federal investigations are public record. Translation: the loan sharks knew Kyle's insurance scheme had failed. Jenny finally understood the implications. Kyle, what happens if you can't pay them? Kyle couldn't answer. Webb requested a brief recess. Both attorneys huddled with their clients in separate corners. Margaret Davis used the break to outline our strategy. Tom, we're filing civil suits for attempted financial elder abuse, plus restraining orders preventing any future contact. What about criminal charges? Agent Chen answered. Federal charges are likely: conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, elder financial abuse, attempted conservatorship fraud. Timeline? Grand jury within 60 days. If indicted, trial within 6 months. Kyle's attorney returned first. Agent Chen, my client is prepared to make a statement. Kyle looked broken. 20 years of marriage, professional reputation, community standing, all destroyed in 5 days. I never intended to actually hurt Tom. But you intended to defraud his insurance? Silence. Kyle, I said, you laughed when you described my potential accidents. That's not protection. That's planning. Kyle's voice was barely audible. I was desperate. The creditors threatened my family. So you threatened mine. Jenny's attorney tried to separate her client. Agent Chen, Jenny was manipulated by her husband's desperation. I played another recording segment. Jenny's voice suggesting they established the depression narrative before the accident. Manipulation? I asked. Jenny suggested the timeline. Agent Chen closed her file. Both subjects will face federal charges. The evidence is overwhelming. Webb made one final attempt. What about plea negotiations? Too early to discuss, Agent Chen said, but cooperation could affect sentencing. The meeting ended with Kyle and Jenny facing federal charges, civil suits, and professional consequences. Kyle's financial advisor license would be revoked. Jenny's pharmaceutical company was conducting an internal investigation. Their plan to steal $950,000 had cost them everything. Margaret Davis walked me to the elevator. Tom, you handled this perfectly. Most victims don't gather evidence this systematically. Most victims aren't Marine intelligence officers. The federal charges will likely result in prison time. Are you prepared for that? They were prepared to kill me for money. Prison is appropriate. The elevator doors opened. 28 floors down to street level. Kyle had gambled with my life. I'd responded with federal law enforcement. He'd planned to make me disappear. Instead, his future had disappeared. Marines adapt, improvise, and overcome. Mission accomplished. The federal investigation moved faster than Kyle expected and slower than Jenny hoped. Within 2 weeks, the consequences cascaded through their professional and personal lives like dominoes falling. Kyle's financial advisor license was suspended pending investigation. Virginia Securities Board received the FBI file Tuesday morning. His clients were notified Wednesday afternoon. Morrison Investment Services terminated Kyle's employment Thursday. 23 clients, $4.2 million in managed assets, 12 years of relationship building, gone. Jenny lasted longer. Bristol Myers Squibb conducted an internal investigation for 3 weeks before placing her on administrative leave. Pharmaceutical companies don't tolerate employees under federal investigation for elder abuse. Her sales territory was reassigned. 15 years of client relationships disappeared overnight, but the professional consequences were nothing compared to the legal ones. Kyle's creditors received word of the federal investigation through public court filings. Atlantic City casinos froze his credit lines. Online poker sites canceled his accounts. The private lending companies were less understanding. 2 men visited Kyle's house on October 3rd. They weren't FBI agents. Their conversation was brief and specific. Payment in full within 30 days, or alternative collection methods would be employed. Kyle panicked and fled to his brother's house in Richmond. Jenny stayed in Virginia Beach, hoping distance from Kyle would help her legal situation. It didn't. Agent Chen called me October 15th with updates. Mr. Cooper, the grand jury returned indictments. Kyle faces conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, elder financial abuse, and attempted conservatorship fraud. Federal charges carry 2 to 7 years per count. And Jenny? Same charges. The recordings show she was an active participant, not a victim. October 22nd brought civil court proceedings. Margaret Davis filed elder abuse suits seeking treble damages under Virginia law. Kyle's assets were frozen pending litigation. His house, cars, investment accounts, everything locked down by federal court order. Jenny's assets received the same treatment. They'd planned to steal my $950,000. Now they couldn't access their own money. The neighborhood response was swift and brutal. Mrs. Henderson organized a petition to remove Kyle and Jenny from the Maple Street Homeowners Association, 27 signatures. Only Kyle and Jenny didn't sign. Bob Henderson stopped speaking to Kyle entirely. 20 years of Friday night poker games ended. The Martinez family moved their investment accounts from Morrison Services. The Johnsons canceled their pharmaceutical insurance plan to avoid working with Bristol Myers. Kyle and Jenny had become pariahs in their own community. November brought plea negotiations. Kyle's attorney contacted Agent Chen seeking a deal. 5 years, federal prison, full restitution, permanent restraining order from contact with me. Jenny's attorney requested separate negotiations. She wanted to testify against Kyle in exchange for reduced charges. I was consulted on both proposals. Tom, Margaret Davis explained, you have input on plea agreements. The federal prosecutor wants your opinion. My opinion is they both participated equally. 5 years for Kyle, 3 years for Jenny? What's the maximum? If convicted on all charges, Kyle faces 21 years, Jenny faces 15. And with plea deals? Kyle serves 5, Jenny serves 3. Both felony convictions, both permanently barred from financial services. The math was simple. They'd planned to murder me for $950,000. 5 years seemed light. But federal prison isn't county jail. Kyle would lose everything: house, career, community standing, marriage. Jenny was already talking divorce. Her attorney filed papers October 28th, claiming spousal abuse and financial coercion. Coercion. The same woman who suggested speeding up the timeline now claimed she was forced to participate. December brought the final consequences. Kyle accepted the plea agreement. 5 years federal prison, $50,000 restitution, lifetime restraining order. Jenny rejected the plea deal and demanded a trial. Her new strategy? Blame everything on Kyle's gambling addiction and claim domestic abuse. Agent Chen wasn't impressed. Miss Cooper Sullivan, the recordings show you actively planning the fraud. Domestic abuse doesn't explain insurance murder. January 15th, 2025. Kyle was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Minimum security facility in West Virginia. February 28th, 2025. Jenny's trial began. 3 weeks of testimony. 22 minutes of recorded evidence. 12 jurors who heard her planning my death. Guilty on all charges. 7 years federal prison. The courthouse steps interview was brief. Mr. Cooper, how do you feel about the sentences? Justice was served. Any message for your daughter and son-in-law? Marines protect what matters: family, freedom, and honor. They forgot I was still a Marine. The reporter asked one final question. What's next for you? I looked toward the horizon. 71 years old, $950,000 in life insurance they couldn't steal, $6,200 monthly pension, and a future they couldn't control. I'm going to live, fully, freely, and for as long as I choose. Kyle and Jenny had disappeared into federal prison. I had disappeared from their reach forever. Mission truly accomplished. It's been 8 months since Kyle and Jenny were sentenced. 8 months since I learned the hardest lesson of my 71 years. Sometimes family is the enemy, and sometimes enemies wear familiar faces. I moved from the Maple Street house in March. Too many memories of Martha, too many neighbors who'd watched my daughter plan my murder. The new place is a townhouse near Oceana Naval Air Station. Familiar sounds, jets taking off, Marines training, the rhythm of military life that shaped me for 28 years. My routine has changed completely. I wake up at 0600, same as always. But instead of frozen dinners and isolation, I volunteer at the VA Medical Center 3 days a week, helping other veterans navigate benefits, housing, family issues. Captain Brooks introduced me to a support group for veterans dealing with family betrayal. Turns out, elder abuse by adult children is more common than anyone admits. My story helps other Marines recognize warning signs. The legal settlements provided enough money to establish the Martha Cooper Memorial Fund for military widow support. The irony isn't lost on me. Money Kyle and Jenny tried to steal now helps people Martha would have loved to assist. I don't have contact with Kyle or Jenny. The restraining orders ensure that. But I hear things through the neighborhood network. Kyle is serving his sentence at Federal Prison Camp Alderson. Jenny is at Danbury Federal Correctional Institution. They'll be released eventually. Kyle in 2028, Jenny in 2030. I'll be 74 and 76 respectively. Still a Marine. Still alert. Still protected by federal law and community support. The house stays locked. Security system activated. Will remains updated and protected by Margaret Davis's law firm. But I'm not living in fear. I'm living in freedom. Freedom from people who saw my grief as opportunity. Freedom from family members who confuse love with legal control. Freedom from anyone who thinks age equals weakness. Martha used to say, "Tom, you never really retire from being a Marine." She was right. Kyle and Jenny learned that lesson the hard way. They thought they were planning a funeral. Instead, they planned their own destruction. If you're watching this because someone's threatening your independence, your finances, or your life, remember this. You're stronger than they think, smarter than they assume, and you have more allies than they know. Fight back. Document everything. Contact professionals. And if you're a veteran being targeted by family members, call the VA immediately. We take care of our own. Semper Fi.